Welcome to those of you at mochurch.tv. So, how many of you, by round of applause, have seen the movie Hustle? I'm prepared to be underwhelmed. Oh, very good, very good. Not bad. Okay, if you got Netflix, it's free. If not, you got to go pay for it, the theater. And you could have gotten Netflix for a couple months for that price. So, Adam Sandler is the star. He's kind of making dramatic roles now happen. And he's great in it. He's really, really good. He's got times where he's funny, but he's doing great in the dramatic roles. Queen Latifah plays his wife. She's not in a ton, but she's great in it. And there's so many NBA cameos, people appearing as themselves, which is a lot of fun if you care about the NBA. Most of you said no. So the central character is a guy named Stanley Sugarman. That's Adam Sandler. And he's a basketball scout for the Philadelphia 76ers for the NBA. And man, he's kind of a road warrior. He travels all the time. He lives life on the road. He travels internationally, always eating fast food, rental cars, taxis, and he's searching for young men who might be future stars in the NBA that he can try to recruit, basically, scout out, bring to the 76ers. And so he's constantly traveling, and that puts a strain on his family, puts a strain on his marriage. He hasn't been home for any of his daughter's birthdays in the last several years because that's always the timing of when he's out scouting for players. And on top of that, some of his trips turn out to be just a waste of time and effort. He travels halfway across the globe, and some prospects that he's traveled to see turn out to be duds because they're a 7-footer who can't hit a bunny shot, or they're a player who gets into physical alterations with their own coach, or they're immature and they're smoking pot before the game. There's all these reasons, he might show up and see an unfortunate injury of the very guy he came to see. Or there's people who aren't the age they say they are. If you saw the trailer for Hustle at the very beginning of the service, I'm 20 years old. The guy's clearly 67, okay? So one particular trip, though, Sugarman flies all the way to Spain, and he finds out that the guy that he's scouting, that he wants to see play in a game, an international game that night, that he's a little bit swollen and he's not going to take the court. He's like, well, what am I even doing here? Who's going to tell me this? Like, he's walking to the stadium when he finds out. And so he asks the guy that he's talking to, he's like, can you tell me where's a local playground where I can just shoot some hoop? And so Stanley Sugarman ends up going to a local playground at night to go shoot some hoop. Now, in real life, this is a true story often for Adam Sandler. He's really actually very good at basketball. He's getting up there now. I'm sure his knees don't feel real well. But he plays a lot of pickup hoops. And in fact, here is evidence. Adam Sandler, this is a picture from 1998, 1999. It's a little grainy. He looks like Steve from Minecraft. But this is Adam Sandler right here, no joke, for real Adam Sandler. And then along with him in this picture is young Jason Liu, elder at Momentum, right there. So yeah, there you go, Jason Liu, 1998. So Jason Liu is 18 years old. He grew up in Southern California. This is at a local university where Adam Sandler just showed up to play some pickup basketball because that's the thing that he did back when he had two good knees. And so Sugarman does this, his character. Sugarman shows up to play some basketball under a lit playground at night. Anytime I go to a playground, it's lit. So anyways, Sugarman shows up to the court. Spectators are gathered all around. He shows up. It's like this electric atmosphere. He's like, whoa. He's like, starts smiling. Like, what's going on here? People are sitting way up on top of these high fences, like totally electric for whatever's happening. There's pandemonium. He's like, what is going on? And they're watching a 5-on-5 pickup game that's for money. These two teams are playing for money. They've pooled their money. Whoever wins the game gets the money. And so they're playing. And as he watches, there's this one guy that's like a showboat. I mean, he is dunking, he's breaking ankles, he's doing some real globetrotter junk, and I mean, he's just fancy. And so he's playing, and the crowd is just eating him up every time he does something, does a trick, anything. People are going crazy. But then another player steps forward from the opposite team, opposite of the showboat. And he's like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to guard him. And this guy's a big man. He's like a tall dude, and he's wearing work boots. And so it's this tall Spanish dude, and he begins to guard the showboat, and he shuts this dude down, and his team wins the money. Well, then afterwards, showboat's kind of getting in his face, talking trash to him, saying, you fouled me over and over and all this kind of stuff. So finally, big dude challenges showboat to a 1v1 for money, But it's not a 1v1 where he's ever going to be on offense. He says, you get 3 shots, 3 takes, and if you can even hit the rim once, you win the money. And he puts his money down. The other guy puts his money down. And big guy absolutely destroys Showboat. Just destroys him. So he wins the money. He puts on his headphones, and he just heads off with his duffel bag to the bus stop. And Stanley Sugarman is stunned by the incredible talent of this unknown player. So he begins to follow him. So go to Matthew chapter 4. Matthew chapter 4, Matthew is a gospel account of Jesus, meaning his life and teachings. What did Jesus do? What did he say? And one of the fundamental things that happens near the beginning of this gospel of Matthew is this. Verses 18 through 20 says this. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. Now, right after that, Jesus does the same thing with 2 other fishermen who are also brothers, James and John, separate family. And so, all 4 of these fishermen are Jewish fishermen who are doing their thing, and Jesus shows up and says, follow me. Now, if you read John chapter 1, another gospel account, what you see is actually there's some more backstory to this. This isn't the first time Jesus talks to them, comes across them, not the first time they hear from Jesus. Jesus isn't just some strange Jewish rabbi who shows up and they're cleaning their nets and all of a sudden this guy shows, hey, follow me. And they're like, oh, okay. And they just walk off and follow him. They've been around Jesus. There's backstory here. And so you realize this isn't the first time they've interacted. Jesus has kind of been scouting them out. They've been interacting, they've been talking, and in the story, he officially invites them to be on his team, if you will. Come, follow me. I'll teach you to be spiritual leaders. I'll teach you to fish for men. And so they leave their past lives and occupations to become disciples of Jesus. So Jesus does that mainly with 12 guys, his 12 main disciples. And there are other people who are disciples of Jesus outside of that circle. There are men, there are women, there are people that stay in their hometown after they have encounters with Jesus. But these 12, they go with him almost everywhere he goes. Now, later in Acts chapter 9, there's a guy whose name is Paul. Now, what's interesting about Paul is he wasn't one of the 12. He's still called an apostle, but he wasn't one of the 12. So the 12 apostles here, you got this guy named Paul, and Paul even refers to himself as an apostle abnormally born, because the way he came about following Jesus was the resurrected Jesus appeared to him. Like after the cross and the resurrection, like the whole real stories of the Gospels are done, and then the resurrected, risen Christ appears to Paul and commissions him and invites him into a relationship and commissions him to go be an apostle, be a sent one, to go reach Jews and especially to become the apostle to the Gentiles, the non-Jews. And so here's one interesting little story as Paul traveled from town to town and what we call missionary journeys. This is from Paul's second missionary journey. Acts chapter 16 says this. Paul came to Lystra, a town where a disciple named Timothy lived, whose mother was Jewish and a believer. That means she was a Jewish woman who became a follower of Jesus, but whose father was a Greek. The believers at Lystra, the people who were Christians there, and Iconium spoke well of Timothy. Paul wanted to take him along on the journey. Now, the interesting thing about Timothy here is he's already a Christian, first of all. That's kind of interesting. He's already a Christian, but as you deduce from those verses and some others surrounding that, is Timothy had a whole lot of spiritual estrogen in his family. His mom was a godly woman. His grandmother was a godly woman, scriptures tell us. But there's no spiritual testosterone in his family. He doesn't have a Christian father. He has no idea what that looks like from a really close up and personal perspective. He doesn't know what it looks like for a Christian man to worship except for the guys that he sees in the house church where he worships. And so he doesn't have that kind of close relationship of the spiritual father. And so Paul sees him and observes Timothy, during one of his trips to Lystra, and he inquires about Timothy. And it says the people of the church there in Lystra speak well of Timothy. He does his research on him. He's scouting him out. And then he decides that he wants Timothy to be on his team. And he's like, I want him to join our crew and travel with us as we travel around. Now, when I see that from Paul, I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, that looks very familiar, doesn't it? Like that seems very much like there's a pattern here. Paul also poured into other people, not just Timothy. He had another disciple. His name was Titus. Titus became a follower of Jesus by hearing Paul's preaching. And there was a guy named Luke who was a Christian doctor, a physician, who traveled around with Paul. And I just have to think Paul impacted Luke's life in so many ways because Paul was just this amazing, insightful follower of Jesus. And so Luke is the one who wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. And so that's another person that Paul was around to invest in. There's a woman named Lydia who was probably an older woman, maybe a widow in the city of Philippi, who Paul is a major catalyst for her spiritually, for her to become a Christian. There's a Christian couple, Priscilla and Aquila. Her name is usually mentioned first because she's probably the prominent of the two. And he's around them all the time. In fact, they have a tent-making business together. They make tents. They sell them as a way to cover their own expenses for ministry as they traveled. And so they travel around, and often they cross paths and they work together. And Paul invested in them. I mean, so Paul seems to be doing what Jesus did. And that is, he's just intentionally finding people, scouting out people that he is going to invest in. He's constantly scouting them out. Jesus, man, he had a way of finding the people that he wanted to put on his team and said, I'm going to ask you, follow me. And then people who followed Jesus, his disciples, they did the same thing. You can read church history and find out that John had a disciple named Polycarp. And John had disciples, one of the 12. And so people that knew Jesus tended to do those same things that Jesus did. They would scout out people, and they would find ways to invest in their lives. A few years ago, a friend and mentor of mine, someone who's pouring into me, named Todd. I was talking on the phone to Todd, and he randomly was like, I got somebody I really want you to meet, Dan. His name's Darren. Now, I don't know if you can hear it, but it ends with an I-N. Could you hear how I'm saying it? Darren? Okay. So he's Darren, and it ends with an I-N. He's a Christian leader in the St. Louis area, and I'll never forget the way he described him to me, and it stood out to me. He said, man, there's just something about Darren that it's like he has a radar for young men who are potential leaders. And it's like if he's in a room, it's like he'll be like, man, I'm going to go talk to that guy. Like, I'm going to go talk to that guy. And he'll ask him questions like a good leader does. He'll talk to him, ask him questions, and kind of start drawing out a story until somehow he finds a way that he can do something to help this guy. Like, is there something I can give you, a resource, connect you with this guy? I got to give you this guy's cell phone number. It's kind of like what Todd's doing with me right now to Darren. And he's like, he just has this radar. And I'll never forget him saying, it's like he's got a radar for young men who are potential leaders. That's the kind of leader he is. And he'll find a way to make himself a resource to them. And I just remember thinking when I heard that from Todd on the phone, man, I wish I had a radar. Man, that's really cool. Like, I really was like, dang. Man, I wish I was like insightful like that. Well, I got to meet Darren, and eventually Darren and I ended up on a team that was planning for Exponential Conference. It's the biggest conference in the world for people who start churches. And I got to be in like a programming team for that for a few years. And one year, Darren came along as like an insightful coach based on the topic that we were talking about. And so we flew to St. Louis from different directions near Darren, spent some time. And man, I totally saw it. And here's the funny thing. Darren was not some dynamic, he wasn't some loud, super outgoing. He's a guy that whenever he had to sit down, he had back issues, so he had to bring a donut pillow. And he's like maybe 2 years older than me. And there was something about him, though, that was just like kind of magnetic. Like he was, kind of like low key. But I could see it. He would like find a way to hone in on you with questions about what was going on in your life, what you were up to. So one, he could learn from that. And two, he could figure out if he could find some way to be a resource to you. I was like, man, there's something about it. But he has this radar. But I think also who he is draws people out so that radar can pick up on like, oh, this guy's being drawn. I was just like, I don't know what's going on here, but this is amazing. And it was really, really cool. He's just such a great scout for young men around him that he could add value to their life, that he could sniff out that potential and be a resource to them. And so, man, that radar and that scouting ability, the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this comes from Jesus. It's like Paul being like Jesus, like Timothy. Man, what do you guys think about Timothy? What about, I think I want him on Timothy, would you like to travel around with us? This is what we do. This is how we do it. I'd love to be around you and be like a spiritual father to you, be a mentor to you if you would allow that. And so Darren was that kind of guy. And so today when I'm talking about Stanley Sugarman and the idea of being a scout, this is what I mean. I'm not talking about looking for people who are super talented. Everybody's doing that. Like, oh man, that guy's really talented, so I want to be that. That woman, she's really talented, so I really want to be. I'm not talking about looking for talent. I'm talking about I am trying to be aware of where God is at work in someone's life. Like I'm trying to get a sense of this person who I'm maybe always around or I'm just crossing paths with in the coffee shop. Like, man, maybe God is up to something in that person's life or in this situation right now. I'm trying to be sensitive to the Holy Spirit inside me if I follow Jesus and have God's Spirit living inside me, that this person, maybe they are receptive to what God is trying to do in their life. So therefore, because of their humility, they're not proud, they're humble, and they're wanting God to do something in their life. Maybe they're kind of low-hanging fruit because of that. And to try to get a sense of who that might be around you, or to have some conversations to see if that draws out or to see if that's something that gets shut down, but to have a radar to be like, man, who are those people that have needs and spiritual needs and emotional needs and all that? And here's what I've discovered over the years is because I have God's Spirit living inside of me, I think I do have that radar. But I think at the time when Todd told me about Darren, I think I was just too self-absorbed. I think I was too busy is probably the best way to put it. Like I was absorbed in my own work and my own problems, my own issues, my own obstacles. And when that happens, you're not paying attention to anybody in the room. Like who in the room has a need? Who cares? I'm drowning in obstacles and problems and agenda. And you're not paying any attention to who you could be a servant to, who you could be a resource. You're not scouting at all. And that's what I realized back in that time. It's like, man, I have the exact same thing Darren. It's not like he has some supernatural insight other than from Jesus. And I have access to that too. And so I just needed to turn my radar on is really what it came down to. So here's the thing I'd say is the first step in this idea of scouting out God's potential, like the potential work that he's doing in people's lives. It's turn on your radar and spot people who need something that you have or need someone that you know. Become a connector for people like, man, the more I'm around this person, or now that I'm just having my first conversation in the PTA with this person, what I'm realizing is I think I have something that could be helpful to them, or I think I know someone that could be helpful to them. What if I help them meet? And the thing that they need, it might be time, it might be attention, it might be food, it might be experience, it might be compassion, it might be knowledge of the scriptures, it might be encouragement, it might be money. But what is it that the people around me need that maybe I could slide over and become a resource for? But I got to turn my radar on to even see those needs, to scout out who those people are. And man, I love seeing this happen at Momentum. Even in the context of the lobby and Mo groups and student ministry, like I see that more and more happening in the culture of Momentum, that people are being aware of, man, I know this person or I just met this person, I love them, and I want to help them. I want to resource them. I want to be a resource for them. And this is totally counterculture because typically what scouting means is if you're in a lobby, if you're in a group, you're in a Mo group, you're looking for the people in the group who can serve your needs, right? Like you're like, who could help me in my career? Who can I get a free ticket from in some kind of way? Who would make me feel good about myself by hanging out with them? Like it's about me. But this is the exact opposite. It's so countercultural. It's saying, I'm turning on my radar to see where's God at work and who might I serve? Like who, maybe God has put me in this Mo group for the reason of helping that person in a way that they're saying they need help. And I happen to have that particular resource. My wife, Shannon, uh, every once in a while, there's somebody that she gets the sense about. And it doesn't happen a lot, but years ago, at least 10 years ago, I'd say, there was a woman in our community. I'm going to make up a fake name for her. Her name's Stacy. And so I put that in my notes. I didn't just make it up. I'll give you honest with you. So Stacy is somebody just in the community. And Shannon one day was like, man, I don't even know how to put this, but I feel like God has put me around Stacy for a reason. And I don't even know what that reason is. I just feel like there's supposed to be some connection there, but I have no idea. And I can't even tell you how random of a person Stacy is. She's not somebody that would be in a room and you'd be like, man, I really want to get to know Stacy because she could do something for me. No. Like, she's just such a random person in the room. And so I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, I really don't even know what I mean. I just feel like God has made us near each other for some reason, and I don't know what it is. So sure enough, Shannon would just be like taking every opportunity she could to say hi to her when she saw her at a school function. And she would take every opportunity she could to sit near her or have a conversation with, just because she was like, what is going on? I don't know, but I have a sense about this person. And she would encourage her. She'd serve her. She'd have spiritual conversations with her, ultimately for the purpose of, God, what are you up to here? I don't even know. So I'm trying to encourage her. I'm trying to hear about her life because there's a hidden clue in here somewhere. I can't figure out what it was. And for years, this person was around us and in our lives. And then a few years later, I remember just vaguely, because I don't remember who it was or anything, but I think I was on a walk with Shannon one day. And she was just like, man, there's this person, this person we've been crossing paths with or whatever. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. She's like, it's so weird, but I get the same feeling about this Stacy. That person that had Stacy, I kind of get that same feeling. This person's around me for a reason. This one was like a very short-term thing. But I was like, man, that's weird, man. I wish I knew Jesus like you do. Like, this is crazy. But it was just a sense of my radar's on. I feel like God's up to something. I'm going to scout out the potential of what's going on here. Students, man, you are in a government-funded program in public school to be around people who have needs. I mean, there are so many kids in your middle school, so many kids in your high school who are hurting, whose parents are about to get divorced and they're broken over it, who are screwing around with stupid things that are destroying them or things that they don't understand the power of. And you're there next to them, and you have an opportunity to be a scout in your school, in your class, to be Stanley Sugarman, and to be like, man, whose lives here is God potentially at work in? And to give them encouragement, to have conversation, which not all people will do with maybe this particular person, or to invite them to amplify the student ministry, and just to say, I got to figure out, where's God working? And some of those kids are not going to want to talk about spiritual things. Some of those kids are going to say no to church, but some of those kids are going to be low-hanging fruit. They're going to be like, I scouted, I worked, and I found there's a kid that God's really been working on. They've never even gone to church, but God's been working on them, and you draw it out. It happens here at Amplify, too. Like, already, like, people have shown up, but now you're here. You're actually on the campus. And there are these students that show up 6 to 8 p.m. on Sunday evenings, or student ministry, 6th to 12th grade. And right now we have this kind of influx of middle schoolers, a whole bunch of kids who have aged up to be in Amplify now after, being in Mo Kids, or just showing up for the first time now to Momentum. And so for the high school students who are now in Amplify, there's this opportunity of like, I'm going to grow, I'm going to have fun, but there's also this added responsibility of, man, there's this whole giant batch of middle schoolers now, and I get an opportunity for this to become a safe place, to make this a safe place for them, to help them feel encouraged and welcome, to help kids that feel unsure. They're just unsure about everything. This is all new to them, and to be that person. And somebody I'd love to brag on, it's National Daughters Day, is my daughter, Aslan, who just has a particular radar for young women around her, for girls, who when she sees them not being connected, when she sees them and she thinks maybe they're being excluded or left out, she has this uncanny ability to scout that out in a room and be emotionally sensitive and sometimes just spiritually aware to say, I'm going to pull them in to what we're doing, the older kids, or the kids that already are connected. And I'm going to pull them in and try to help them and be a resource to them in that way. And so the first step to being a scout for that kind of work that God is up to in people's lives is really just to turn on your radar. To be like, I'm going to be more aware when I'm in a room. I'm going to turn on my radar for unchurched people, for young people, for new Christians, or for struggling people that have needs, or disconnected Christians, or potential leaders, or emerging leaders, whatever it is. And I'm going to be a fan of them. I'm going to cheer for them. I'll coach, and I'll train even if it gets to that point, like Stanley Sugarman. In the movie Hustle, Sugarman finds out that the baller's name from Spain, ooh, that was cool. His name's Bo Cruz, which I'm going to legally change my name to Bo Cruz, by the way, because I think it's awesome. Sugarman sees just a ton of potential in this guy and a ton of potential greatness in this Spanish baller. And so he tells his wife, I love the way he describes Bo Cruz to his wife and to others at times in the movie. He's like, this kid, it's like if Scottie Pippen and a wolf had a baby. He's just like, it's like if Scottie Pippen and a wolf had a baby and Lisa Leslie raised them and Allen Iverson is the babysitter. And, he just has all these ways. He's like, he's just such an incredible mix of size and speed and quickness and all this kind of stuff. But it's like Sugarman sees at the beginning all that could be from him being the guy that finds Bo Cruz. And he sees all this. Like, in the 76ers promise, the owner promises to get Stanley off the road if he finds somebody that will make the 76ers a championship caliber team. So his incentive is, if I find that guy, I get to get off the road. And so he has some reasons and some motivations that are selfish to find somebody like that. And he knows, man, that's a big deal. And so he sees the money, the respect, the championship hardware that could come from this. He even says at one point, he says to his wife, he'll be in the top 10 of the league immediately. And he said, and being the guy who finds the guy matters in this business. Being the guy who finds the guy, it matters in this business. But as the plot unfolds pretty quickly in the movie, Stanley Sugarman's focus starts to shift. And it goes from, what could Bo Cruz do for me if he becomes that guy in the NBA, to what are the interests of Bo Cruz? And in fact, one time he says to his wife, he says, I don't even know if I want to give him to the team, the 76ers. He's like, I don't even know if I want to give him to the team. He says, and you heard this in the trailer if you're here to be in service, I just want to do what's right for the kid. So the shift has totally changed from me, I could get off the road, this would be so great for me in my career, to I just want to do what's right for the kid. And no spoilers, but I love the way that this resolves at the end of the movie. At Momentum, one of the things we say a lot is everybody at Momentum, everyone is a leader or a potential leader. I truly believe that. There are people leading in student ministry that 5 years ago you'd have been like, no way. Leading Mo groups, no way. Having spiritual influence in their circles out in the community, like spiritually influencing people, that they would have laughed at it themselves. But everyone at Momentum is a leader or a spiritual leader. And I want to talk about leadership for just a second in light of Stanley Sugarman's character. There's a book that's called Building a Story Brand. It's by Donald Miller. If you've been reading Christian books for a long time, which 3 of you have, there's a book long ago called Blue Like Jazz. Donald Miller wrote that. It's kind of an artsy, fun, refreshing book. Lately, he's been a CEO of a business he started that's a marketing business, and he's been a marketing guru. He's a Christian dude. He's an author, but he really is a marketing guru. And so he has this book called Building a Story Brand. And man, I love one of the things he says in it is he says, if you are a leader, a point leader in any kind of way, you're a Mo group leader, you're an elder, you're a parent, you are someone who volunteers as an adult in student ministry and Amplify. If you're a leader in some kind of way, he says what you have to do is be careful about equating you, the leader, with the role of hero. He's like, you can't equate the role of leader with the role of hero. You just can't do that. He says you can't do that or it will destroy everything. This is really powerful for parents too, I think. Donald Miller says leaders never play the hero in the story. He says always play the guide. The guide's purpose is helping the hero win. Now, it's funny, we talked about this a couple years ago when we did our rebrand. For those of you who are here, we changed our logo and, kind of described why and what it meant. But that service, we talked about Alfred. Be Alfred, not Batman. Like, know that your story is really about someone else's story. That's Stanley Sugarman. Your story is really about someone else's story. What if the whole point you're on earth is to prepare your kid to do some amazing things in this world? That it really isn't even about you. Like, it's hard to get your mind around as a parent. You're like, yeah, that's right. But really think about that. What if they're the big deal? Or someone in your proximity is the big deal, and your job is to be Alfred, not Batman. And so let me give you some other examples. You be Yoda, not Luke. Be Haymitch, not Katniss. Be Mr. Miyagi, not Daniel. Or Mr. Han, not Dre, or whatever, So just forget about that one. Be Uncle Ben, not Spider-Man. Be Timon and Pumbaa, not Simba. No, that's just stretching. Okay. So, but ultimately, it's be Stanley Sugarman, not Bo. This is the deal. It's like, I have to picture, if I really want to be a leader, if I really want to have impact and influence on people's lives, I can't go around picturing myself as the hero. I have to picture people around me as the heroes. I'm the guide for the hero. I'm the guide. And I'm really trying to, as I absorbed this again this week and rethought about that old Alfred message from a couple years ago, I was like, man, I got to relearn this. I have to retrain. It's really difficult because everyone is the star of their own movie. Everyone just pictures in life they're the hero, and everything around me, everybody else are minor characters. I'm the main character. I'm the main plot. That is how the ego is wired, is to be selfish and to think it's all about you. So it really takes a lot of time to even think, like, man, how am I the guide instead of trying to be the hero? And so Miller says, if you're a leader, you never want to play the hero in the story, because when you do, you remove yourself from other people's stories. This is so insightful. And so basically, what he means by that is, picture this: we're at a party, I'm talking to you or something like that, and we're at a party and we're talking, and you say, hey Dan, how have things been for you lately? Now, if I say, well, I'm a pastor, I lead a church or whatever, and man, it's been a crazy few years. It's been a really crazy few years. I mean, there was a time where even everybody was home, and I was preaching to a room of 5 people. It was like the band and the text, and everybody was at home watching. And man, I just killer jokes, but nobody's laughing. It was tough, And so, just like, man, it's been really tough. And then leading out of that and building back as a church and all this kind of stuff, like, man, it's been really, really, what I'm doing is I'm creating a story where I am the hero up against obstacles, up against conflict. That's what a story is. And I'm the hero in it. I'm trying to burst through all the obstacles. That's what it's all about. And here's the rub. I have now separated myself from their story, because in their story, they're the hero, right? They're also the hero. So they picture themselves in a completely different story. Yeah, he's got his crap. I got my crap going on. That's how it is. But say we're at the same party, and I'm talking to you or talking to a random person, and they say, hey, Dan, what are you doing? How you been doing? What are you up to? And I say, well, I'm a pastor of a church, and I've been doing pretty good. I've been teaching a series at church where we try to take movies from the last year, and we try to talk about the plot and how it relates to Scripture and, like, spiritual messages. And so, I've been using plots from movies over the last year to try to help people grow spiritually and to put the past behind them. That was Top Gun Maverick. Or how to be a better friend and godly friend. And, that was last week, some of that. And so, I'm also part of a small group, my Mo group. I'm kind of in a new Mo group, in this season. And this is what they're doing at my church. But if I say that about how I'm trying to resource and be a resource to others, suddenly our stories are overlapped. Like, wait a minute. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, like you're trying to help people become better friends. You're trying to help people put the past behind them. I'm talking about things that I've just entered their story. Like, these are human problems that I'm talking about. Like, we've just suddenly overlapped. And so, if that's, you at that party in my place, and say someone says to you, what have you been up to? You could insert something that's true, but you could say, man, I'm getting ready to lead this Financial Peace University class at our church. And man, it's about, like, inflation has been just crazy. And it's about helping people get out of debt. It's about helping people invest for the future. Just trying to get finances and have a plan for that. And suddenly you're in their story because they're like, yeah, inflation has been nuts. Or, yeah, the average American family has this amount of debt. And yeah, man, I haven't been paying attention to investing like I should be to prepare for retirement or that kind of stuff. And so suddenly you're in their story. How are you doing? I'm doing pretty good. I'm hosting a Mo group that is really about trying to help moms, kick butt as moms, or trying to help married couples strengthen their marriage. Or I'm a part of this Mo group, Jeremy Kunka, that's creating space for young adults to talk about spiritual conversations. And so what happens there is the other person is like, wait a second, this is a guide. This is someone who has something that I could benefit from, that I could be helped by. This is a Stanley Sugarman. This is someone who has something, they could guide me. And so now I'm a little bit more interested in your story because you're not the hero in it. You're trying to be a guide for other people in that story. And now you're in their story and the worlds have collided and you exist in the same universe. And so if you're the guide in the story, you're actually the person that everybody's looking for, is someone who will help them win. Everybody's looking for someone to help them win. I think it's this God-given survival mechanism, and it can become lost and selfish and broken. But that's people's default, is they start with that. And so I think a leader's role is helping people win. And for us, that could be socially, financially, in their marriage, all these different reasons. But ultimately, we want to help people win spiritually. And all those other components factor into that. And so in the movie Hustle, eventually Sugarman starts personally footing the bill for Bo's expenses while he is in the U.S. training for the NBA Combine. And he starts footing the bill for his hotel, for his food, his other expenses, and the 76ers are not. And so he literally is investing in Bo. He's betting on Bo as a person. And so much later, Bo realizes that the 76ers haven't been paying for his hotel and his food and all that stuff. And he asks Sugarman, he says, wait a second, if the Sixers aren't paying for me, then who's been paying? And Sugarman says, me and T. T's his wife. He says, me and T have been paying. And he says, oh, man, I eat so much mini bar. He said, I'm going to have to pay you back. And Sugarman says, wait, no. He says, no, coaching you has been the best month of my life. And I just want to say, man, the other stuff that you're chasing that isn't investing spiritually in people or investing in them in some way that ultimately might lead to spiritually investing in them, anything else you're doing, it's not it. It's not the thing that you're going to look back and be like, that was so fulfilling. I'm so glad I was chasing that. So glad I was chasing that level in that video game. I'm so glad I was chasing that level in my company. So glad I was chasing. That's not it. And it's just a matter of how many years is it going to take for us to realize that's not it. Hustle teaches us, Jesus teaches us, your story is about someone else's story. Your story is about being like Jesus, who is a servant to others. It's about investing, resourcing, coaching up, cheering on, pushing, challenging, investing in someone else to get them to their full potential and to see how God is at work in their lives. And if you want to have a spiritual impact on people, the bottom line is you got to be around them. You got to be in close proximity. You got to be able to, rub up against them a little bit and spend time, hear about their life. And in a Mo group, a weekly Mo group is just such an essential way for that to happen if you want to invest in people around you that are in all kinds of different places spiritually. To go to a Mo group, that's a sacrifice. It's a couple hours a week to show up to a Mo group. But it's Stanley Sugarman's shift from what's best for me to what's best for the kid. Like there are people in that Mo group that you're going to show up who need what you have to give, the encouragement, the help, the advice, the camaraderie, the friendship, whatever it is. There's a multitude of things, and that's what you would be there for. Your story is not about you. Your story is about someone else's story. And if you are a follower of Jesus and you've been doing it for a while, man, we need our godliest people. We need our most spiritually mature, most spiritually discerning people who follow Jesus in Mo groups adjacent to other people so that other people can be resourced spiritually. And that's doing what's right for the kid. A few weeks ago, I had the privilege of eating lunch with my friend Ron Meadows, and at the end of the meal, I busted open a fortune cookie. And usually I just look at them like, that was stupid. That could have been said to anybody. And this one I liked. It said, if you have knowledge, let others light their candles by it. If you have knowledge, let others light their candles by it. Now, I know you're thinking, man, Dan is getting desperate. He's using fortune cookies. He's totally running out of material. It's like, no, man, I got more. Just wait, okay? But no, but I did love that, though. I was like, man, I love that image of like, if I will allow myself to be available and in close proximity to others, and if I will allow myself to enter into other people's darkness, then they can light their candles by it. I'm like, man, some of you have spiritual knowledge, godly wisdom from Jesus-like habits and disciplines and practices, but all that knowledge will die with you if you don't continually pass it on to the others around you. Starting to wrap up, but Donald Miller, that Christian dude, marketing guru, author, he says this, I think it's super profound. He says, if you fast forward to your funeral, he said, you will realize that if you wanted to be respected in life, if you wanted people to pay attention to you, if you wanted people to cry because you're gone at your funeral, if you wanted all that, he said, everything that you thought you were going to get by playing the hero, you will only get by playing the guide. Man, that is insightful. Think of the ways that you would like to have impact, legacy, that you would like to have a ripple effect, even into the near future, into even not so long-term history. Like I'd like to have this kind of impact. The only way you will get that is by not being the hero, but by being the guide. All the things that you want, that you picture being a hero, the only way you can get it is by being the guide. You got to be Stanley Sugarman. You got to be Yoda. You got to be Mr. Miyagi. You got to be the one who says, my story is about someone else's story. And the thing I love about this movie is it's very similar in that it's like cool, there's training montages and all that, but it's Karate Kid from the perspective of Mr. Miyagi. It's the one who is saying, the main character is the one who's saying, it's not my story, it's about someone else's story. And that's the only thing that you will achieve legacy and impact and ripple effect is if you realize, man, I got to be the guide. My story is about someone else's story. Jesus talks about how the world system full of greatness, the world system is about power and accumulating authority and using authority over people and all that stuff. But he taught his disciples something very different from the world's system. And he said, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man, Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus served us. He helped us win spiritually through sacrifice, through the cross. He was the guide that scouted out a few disciples and then gave his life as a ransom for many. Let's pray.